Another close call for the Trojans. We will break it down and, of course, look forward to a do-or-die game against the mighty Washington Huskies coming up at the Coliseum. Welcome into Trojan Conquest Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all being here. You understand that you ultimately produce the show, so leave those comments and questions in the live chat and consider your contribution here to the show. Could include a super chat as well. And, of course, the guys that make it all happen, these are the experts. We got Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire, and of course, our host for many of our array of shows here at our USC channel at the Voice of College Football, Mr. Tim Prangley. Guys, how we doing tonight?
Doing great. First time in a couple of weeks we talked about a win, right, Matt? So I guess I can't complain too well. We can still complain, but maybe not as much as normal.
We're in a really weird place, and that's going to be part of our conversation tonight here at the Voice of College Football. I mean, as a journalist, but also, we're all sports fans. Like, we all fell in love with sports before any of us chose to cover them. As fans, I think we can all relate to the idea that, there are times when, you want to win, like you always want to win. You want the players to feel good. You want the fan base to have something to believe in, to hope for. But there are also times when, that things have to change, and things have to get a lot better. And sometimes in order for things to get a lot better, you need to have a rock bottom moment. And if USC had lost to Cal, that would have been a rock bottom moment, which would have made it absolutely impossible for Lincoln Riley to avoid making the kinds of changes that he really needs to get this program headed in the right direction. So in that sense, it was kind of a missed opportunity. And we have to say that game was a lot like Clay Helton. That was a Clay Helton era USC game in so many ways. It was a lot like the 2020 pandemic season when, the overall performance is poor, but the team makes a comeback in the fourth quarter, and the coach after the game, instead of saying how unacceptable this level of performance was, because that's always what, Clay Helton never went down that road. It's, oh, this team showed character. Oh, this team showed resilience in coming back. And, I'll give the guys credit. They were down 14 in the fourth. They could have wilted. They could have folded the tent, could have called it a season. No, they fought back. And there's a certain amount of credit you have to give for that. But really, like that, this is bad football. USC's playing bad football. It hasn't played good football since September. This feels a lot like the Clay Helton experience. So, people were saying, oh, their records are the same after 22 games. That was always a junk food talking point because Helton took over USC when he had Sark's recruits in 2015. He had a lot to work with. Lincoln Riley inherited rock bottom from Clay Helton. So those are two really totally different things. But the playing style, the resemblance is beginning to be pretty strong, uncomfortably strong. And that, in many ways, is the greatest indictment of Lincoln Riley that one can make, that the team looks a lot like the Clay Helton teams of 2020 and 2021.
Before we let Tim cut loose on this one, I'm going to interject this as a general sports or college football fan point, regardless of the team we're talking about, but it applies to USC right now because you started to take us down a path of what the mindset of a typical fan should be or could be following a game like this. So on one hand, yes, if you're understanding of what the expectations are at a place like USC that are unmatched across the country, except for about 5 or 6 different places, and if you're understanding of Lincoln Riley's paycheck, if you're understanding of his pedigree and everything involved, the transfer portal additions, everything that USC football should be and could be, your understanding of the expectations and moving into a Big Ten situation that's going to be highly hyper competitive next season. On the other hand, I hope we don't lose the joy of the victory and the excitement of the win, the excitement of the competition, enjoying the game and taking that away from it. And constantly, because I am around fan bases every day that are just they're spoiled with winning, and no win is good enough, and no, the season is basically a circling of 3 dates on the calendar, and everybody else we should beat by 50, and nothing satisfies. And so I know that that's kind of a difficult balance to take to a certain extent for any particular fan that wants to be a knowledgeable, reasonable, high expectant fan, but still enjoy the season, enjoy the win. That was a fun game. It was an exciting game. It was a game that I caught up with sometime early in the fourth quarter. And that's just my 2 cents in regards to what I think is at least a balanced perspective.
Well, here's where I'll jump in. I also, Matt, lived through the Helton years, and what I've seen the past 2 years, there have been some gaffes, but there's been nothing like what I saw during the Helton years. I'm with you 100%. Whoever put that stat up for the beginning of both of their careers, just absurd. You're coming off of Sark was having off the field issues, but the cupboard was stocked with some absolute studs. We saw that in 2016, literally 2016, basically those guys just with regardless of coaching, they won on their own because they were just such great NFL. Look at the NFL guys that were on that 2016 team, just absolute rock stars. This year, it seems like there's issues, gaping holes we have still in personnel. I think that we're a victim of our own success. I think that there are clearly some blind spots that Lincoln Riley has. I'm willing to give him that latitude, being the fact that he's only 40 years old. I can't say he's a new coach though. That's one thing we have to say. We got to roll it around. He's had a number of years as a head coach. It's not like this is year 3 or 4 for him in coaching. So you could weigh it up, his youth, but he's also got a lot of experience in the game. I, for one, am with you, Mark, on this fact that I did live through Hackett and I lived through the laughing stock. USC has been a laughing stock for a decade because of how they've handled this program in general. At least now we have a professional AD. We've had 2 in a row that are not ex-football players. We now have a coach who, fine, fans and the media don't like the way he talks, but his proven track record of being an elite coach is clearly there. And I, for one, am not going to freak out. The blind spot of the defense and how the changes were not made with Grinch, that's clearly a huge stain on him so far as a young coach. But it's going to get better. Do a short list of the DCs we think we might get, right? Add any of those guys to this situation right now. Our recruiting will turn around rapidly. We talked about the recruiting, by the way. We got some good news on the recruiting front recently. But this team, and I would hate to hear it, is damn close to being really good. I know people hate hearing that after a loss, but this team, Matt, I will debate you all night long about who they have on this roster right now, and with the right defensive staff, this team could be very. Okay, I don't mean this season, Matt. This season is as far as national championship. Okay. I'm saying this program is very close.
Yes. Okay. You get an elite defensive coordinator. Absolutely. Okay.
Or not even Matt.
You're talking about this team. Yeah. Okay.
Not even elite. Just a solid defensive. Because we're still gonna score 50 points. We don't need elite defensive coordinator. We just need the fact that we don't giving up 12 missed tackles in a game, or almost leading the country in explosive plays given up. We just need somebody to mind the store and let these athletes out there play.
For this particular team, but you may want to take a cue from another elite that plays in Columbus, Ohio, because they're playing their rear ends off on defense this year because they had a dip in offense. So why not go get the elite defensive coordinator and have it all?
I'm not passing up on it. Wait. What I'm saying is unlike a lot of other programs that live and die off of, they need an elite defense. What we've seen here is you don't need that. You don't need to have a top, like at LSU, or sometimes, the defense is a lot better now. But look at Ohio State last year. Not a great defense, a good defense, not elite, right? But they had elite offense. I think that's what you're going to see with USC if they have a mediocre guy. If they can turn around like Knowles has done this year and then go towards the elite side of defense with that kind of an offense, then you're cooking.
I'm going to make this statement knowing that the odds are stacked against USC because it's Washington this week, then it's a trip to Autzen, then even UCLA. I don't sleep on UCLA. I think they're a really good football team if they can just get capable turnover prevention play at quarterback. They're pretty good. And we know that it went down to the wire last year. Has all hope been given up? This team's got one loss in the Pac-12.
Well, a lot of people are going to hit this. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I've pretty much given up hope. I think
Really?
USC gets dump trucked this weekend by the Huskies. But but you can make the case that hey, you put all your chips in the middle of the table. You do have Caleb Williams. You're playing at home, and Washington's been bad the last 2 weeks. So like there is a flicker of hope. But like when a team, Bill Parcells, you are what you are, right? And USC has not been good for a month. And so like that gives me zero hope in this team this season. Like this is very, again, it's very Clay Helton-esque. Like the game against Cal, we saw that throughout the 2020, the pandemic season, scrambling late, but sloppy all over the place, soft, not guys not in the right place like that. That was a Helton game in Berkeley. So, to me, and I've been the bad cop all season. So was last Saturday reason for me to suddenly become Mr. Sunshine Pumper? I don't think so. I'm not going to change my spots now. If USC delivers a big time performance and beats Washington, okay, but I'm the doubting Thomas in this crowd for sure. We need to see it before I trust this team. I do not trust this team right now.
I find it really hard to believe that this defense, because one of the weaknesses has been the secondary. What I want to see is this elite, because I do think that USC is one of the top teams in quarterback pressures. They're up there. They were up there until recently in tackles for loss. They can, and if they can string, if USC strung together 4 quarters like they're capable of, the issue that we have is you have a team that gives explosive plays, and we're going against one of the most prolific offenses in college football. That's where you're going to have your issue. I'm hoping that they do see something. You never know. Again, also football's about matchups, Matt, and right now you're right. Their defense is exactly lighting it up either. It's not like we're facing Notre Dame's defense or Utah's defense again. We just put up 50 on Cal, and that's with Caleb. You look at Caleb. What's freaking me out is still like for 4 weeks now, he's had that issue with his pinky. He isn't right. I keep hoping he'll get right, but he just isn't. There's something wrong there. USC needs to string together 4 quarters, because if USC plays 4 quarters where they're capable, they absolutely. As a matter of fact, you know what? Lincoln Riley said that in his press conference. They put together 4 quarters. The problem is that they're inconsistent. That for whatever reason, second year of this defense falls asleep. The linebackers get sucked inside. Although I showed on a tweet I put out, it was literally 2 of the most blatant holes I've ever seen in my entire life. The linebackers inside. There's the C gap's clearly wide open. He's somehow in the B gap getting plugged up in the trash. When he always do is step in that gap, and boom, that second 65-yard touchdown run should have been handled right there at the line of scrimmage. Now, that has to get done. That is coaching. That is 100% coaching. It needs to be automatic. This offense needs to allow this defense needs to allow these guys just to play as playmakers. Because when you have superior athletes, just put them in a position to make a play. It just seems like they're asked to make choices, and a young freshman on that play I'm talking about got sucked inside, and wham, you give Otto a crease and he's gone, and that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, if this team plays 4 strong quarters, we have not seen that since Nevada, because the team basically took the second half off against Stanford. So Nevada's been the one game which wire to wire was just, completely good, but that's Nevada. So can USC play one complete game against a good opponent? Haven't seen it yet. But if we're all waiting and we're all hoping, I hope USC plays a complete game. That would be great, because if, here's the thing, if USC does play a complete game, and I'm obviously not predicting it, but if USC plays a complete game, let's just sit with that thought for a moment. It would show that this coaching staff and these players are capable of growth and evolution. And so even if Oregon beats USC the following week and the Trojans don't make the Pac-12 championship game and the season would be fundamentally a failure, at least you would walk away saying that everyone did grow to some extent. Everyone went through a really rough, ugly, prolonged patch and found a way to grow from it. I mean, if we can at least have that walking out of this season, going into 2024, going into the Big Ten, that will give everyone like a touchstone, a reference point saying, hey, when things are horrible, we can climb out of it to a certain extent. So that would be great. But of course, nothing that we've seen this season leads to that kind of redemptive arc, that kind of transformation. But like if it happens, it would be a fantastic thing to behold.
Talking USC football with all of you here each and every Monday night. It's at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, where it counts. Trojan Conquest Live with Tim Prangley, who also hosts call-in shows throughout the week, and of course the post-game with Tony and Rick on Saturday night. Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire. That is the place to be to catch Matt's work each and every day. Matt, of course, I got to think that you and the rest of the crew there are geared up for this Washington game and plenty of content on hand.
Absolutely. And we're gonna have some interesting conversations. And I think one of the conversations to be had is, and I invite people in the chat to wrestle with this one, is, and it kind of touched on what I said earlier. Do you want USC to win? I think most people would want USC to win, but really, is it more important that USC wins, or is it more important that things happen which guarantee that Alex Grinch and Bennie Wiley get fired? I think that's a really important question. Do you want to win the game, or do you want to make sure that the two coaches that are holding you back the most get cleaned out of this staff, and so that you get a significant upgrade at these two centrally important jobs, defensive coordinator and strength coach, heading into 2024. That is a debate the USC fan base should be having. And I have my own opinion. I think that getting rid of Grinch and Wiley is more important than winning the games that are left on the schedule, because the playoffs out of the picture, and winning the Pac-12 is a low percentage chance at this point. But I respect the idea that, hey, you take the field every week at USC intending to win, striving, trying to be the best you can be. Totally understand that. But I really do think the program's at a point where the number one priority, make sure that Grinch and Wiley aren't back next year, because that's how the program long-term can grow and evolve. So I'm really interested in what fans think about that one.
Well, as a fan and an alum, I don't ever want to lose. And I'll tell you one thing, Matt, I'm never going to mail in a conference championship, especially this is if this was just a league game and a year where in the Pac-12, I might almost bite on that. But there's a couple things why I'm not going to. One, it is blatantly obvious to the entire fan base, to the entire media, that this defense is not nearly where it should be with the talent that we have. Again, we're among the worst teams in giving up explosive plays. We're among the worst teams in tackling in the country. We've given up 49 points to Cal. Look at every game this year that we've turned regular guys into All-Americans every single game. It's not like all of a sudden, if he wins a couple of games here, we'll go, oh, well, now listen, I'll tell you what, let me flip it around on you, Matt. Let's just say this for the heck of it. Let's say that the defense shows up and they actually put a hurting on these teams. Let's say they win by about, I don't know, we don't think crazy. Let's say SC wins by like 10 points in the next two games. What do you say then?
Well, if USC wins 52-42 as opposed to 31-21, those are two very different conversations.
Well, hold on. We are playing two of the better offenses in the country the next 2 weeks. So what I'm saying
Nevertheless.
is okay. Well, I don't want to keep. I don't want to keep Grinch. I don't want that narrative going in the rolling in the chat. So Grinch needs to go. Okay. Period. But what I am saying is that would be the sticky situation you're talking about. If the defense really stands up and really shows well, that could be problematic. Yeah. But here's my point. I'll be okay with problematic if USC wins the next 3 games, wins the conference championship, and goes to a BCS bowl and wins, because that's probably what it would take for him to keep his job. And I'll take that over a firing. I literally would. I'll probably get crucified for that, but I can't pack in a season. I think he's gone no matter what, because what I just named isn't going to happen.
We know going to happen.
Because if it did happen, because if it did happen,
that I would take that. Yes.
You know, that would mean that maybe it is turning around, because if you could beat a top 5 team, and then you could turn around and beat probably another top 7, 8 team, and then you beat a top 20 team in UCLA, and then go and beat one of these teams again in the conference championship game, then you guys should say, wait a minute, maybe we were being premature.
Totally.
Now, is that going to happen? There's no way in hell that's going to happen.
Yes. It's not heading in that direction, but yes, if you tell me USC wins the next 3 games, Alex Grinch being retained is back on the table. Yeah. Right. I mean, like I'm certainly willing to roll with that scenario. But
so Matt, let's win all the games and then lose poorly in a bowl game and get rid of Alex Grinch. How about that? We'll win the conference. We'll lose to a team. We'll lose to like a Tulane level game again, right? And then he'll be let go. And I can live with that.
That would thread the needle. Yes.
Yes, it's more than historic season, it being the final season of the Pac-12, and I believe USC has 39 conference championships.
Yep,
they could
this will be number 40,
and even 40, and I think whoever's number 2 is at 19. There's a collection of teams at 19, 17 in that range. UCLA and Washington, I think, are 2 of the 3, and I think if USC was able to pull that off the next 4 games, then we're going to be repeating 2016, where there are going to be all sorts of people across the country saying, we know that they don't have a resume or the win-loss record to make the playoff, but they just beat Washington, Oregon, UCLA, and then beat Washington or Oregon again. And they're sitting here at 10-2 or 11-2. They should be in the college football playoff.
Yeah, USC with 39, Washington and UCLA with 17, Stanford with 15, Cal with 14. Super chat, Mark.
Yes, we've got, I believe, Wacho, because it's spelled with an H and not a K. So Wacho 789. And I knew that somebody was going to make the correlation here on the biggest college football news of the day. Brian Ferentz fired at Iowa. However, he will finish out the current college football season. So Iowa fired their offensive coordinator today, likely because transfer portal opens in 6 weeks. They want to retain offensive talent, get an early start on their new offensive coordinator hire. How important is the timing of firing Grinch, assuming it happens?
So to me, Wacho, I don't think the timing is especially important. You know, the main thing is just that he's gone before the bowl game, whenever that is, and you make sure that the search for a defensive coordinator is exhaustive. And, you know, let's keep in mind, and some people think that Lincoln Riley is still going to go to bat for Grinch. That might be true, but what's changed? Jen Cohen is now the AD, you know, someone who didn't preside over bringing Riley in to USC in 2021. So there's a different dynamic there. And Jen Cohen's place in this is something that still is not being talked about as much as it should be, because she probably thought she was inheriting a Cadillac, and right now it looks a little bit more like an Edsel, you know, or a Volkswagen. And so, you know, how Jen Cohen relates to Lincoln Riley is going to be really important.
All right. Yes, Washington, a 3-point favorite at the Coliseum coming up this Saturday night. It's a 4:30 local time kick on ABC. We've got Lars Hansen joining us now from Locked On Huskies. You can also catch Lars' work at UW Fan Nation. Lars, how you doing tonight?
Good, guys. How you guys doing?
Doing well,
Doing
doing well.
great.
Thanks for
Good.
jumping
Thanks
on
for
board
joining
with
us.
giving us that Husky perspective. And I will get us started, and then I will back out of the way and let Matt and Tim and you, Lars, match up these two teams. If we go back 3 or 4 weeks, this was an offense that was clicking at such a level, and they're still producing the best passing metrics in the sport, most prolific passing offense. But it's been a rough few weeks against the likes of Arizona State, and before that, Arizona. Of course, the Oregon game was maybe the best college football game of the season. So what is not happening with this Washington offense that looked unstoppable just 3 or 4 weeks ago?
So there's a few factors there. Part of it is they got a few guys injured. Jalen McMillan, a wide receiver, has been dinged up really since the second half of Michigan State, and he started to come back against Oregon, lasted 8 snaps, tried to come back against Stanford, lasted 12. So I guess there's a marginal improvement there, but really nothing. And even though Washington does have 2 fantastic receivers in Roma Odunze and Jalen Polk, who the latter more people have gotten to know about this season. Everyone kind of knew about Roma Odunze's ability, but this season people have learned more about Jalen Polk. But Jalen McMillan is the X factor in the middle that takes away that sort of third option. It kind of just draws people away and allows somebody else to always be open. With that, they haven't necessarily had as open of a passing offense. And also, one thing offensive line coach Scott Huff told me after the Arizona game was Arizona, of all people, Jed Fish, so credit to Jed Fish on this, showed them a defensive look that they hadn't seen before. And so I think teams started to realize, hey, there's actually a way to which you can scheme around Washington and disrupt Penix, even if you don't actually sack him. There's ways to get him off his timing with his receivers. And as a result, teams have started to find more ways to not sack, but get after Penix in different ways. And I think that's sort of combined with the injuries and Julius Brillo along the offensive line. They got him back at Stanford. He was out for a couple of weeks as well. So I think both of those factors combined have kind of caused Washington's offense to not look as effective.
Lars, my main question for you is that, the Arizona State game, that always set up as like the Oregon hangover. We all know in this business that 19, 20-year-olds, you're not going to bring the same level of intensity to the field each and every week. Not all games are equal, as much as coaches might like to say that, push that. Like, we know that the Oregon game was extremely draining, extremely exhausting. You're just not going to be up for Arizona State at the same level. But then Stanford the week after, I think a lot of people thought Huskies are going to get back in the saddle, going to get back to being, a really elite team. Didn't really happen. So how much concern is there in the Washington camp that they didn't really get right against Stanford? Is this just kind of wearing the target now as like having national championship pressure and expectations? Is that weighing on the team? Do you think it really is down to the McMillan injury and some of the other places where the team might be a little shorthanded? Or is it something else that we haven't mentioned yet?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily this team is feeling the weight of the season, right? Or the weight of the pressure. I don't think none of the players and none of the coaches really give off that kind of vibe. We don't get to go to practice, but just talking to them on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, none of them really seem any different than they were after Tulsa and Boise State and Michigan State. So I don't think it's necessarily that, but I do think that the target point of, hey, Washington is going to get everyone's best matchup every week. They're going to get their best fight every week, no matter. And I mean, and also the Pac-12, a lot of people said it was a deep conference. Even an average Pac-12 team is better than a traditional year, right? So I think they're getting everyone's best punch and they're handling it, right? And that's the other part. I mean, as sloppy as it looked, right? I mean, Lincoln Riley mentioned it after the Cal game where he said, and I told you a couple of weeks ago, if Washington won a game at home and didn't score an offensive touchdown, you would call me a liar, right? Like, nobody would believe that. And I wouldn't believe that. There's no way they don't at least get one. So to your point, that we did see a little bit better effort against Stanford, again, albeit it is Stanford, they're nowhere near what they used to be. But getting that first offensive touchdown, I think the struggle for them is they have not been able to run the ball effectively, consistently since I think the Cal game. It's certainly not after the month of September. Dylan Johnson has been able to be effective at times, but there's been nobody else behind him. They don't have Cameron Davis, who they lost to a season-ending knee injury coming into the season, so he wasn't ever going to be a factor. But he would have been had he not had that injury in fall camp, and everyone got to see that last year as he kind of served as the second option to Wayne Talapapa. And I think Cam really had cemented himself as the lead back, and I think the reason was we're now seeing that nobody has been able to come really near Dylan Johnson in terms of number of touches and efficiency and effectiveness, right? I mean, Sam Adams, who never really has had a chance to play and never really shown the ability to stay healthy for a season, has gotten more reps than Will Nixon in these past few weeks. So it's kind of perplexing to see, okay, are they literally just trying to find something that works? And the problem is nothing is working, right, from the run game perspective. And as a result, you have to sorry, that's my, I hope you guys don't get bothered by that, but the run game isn't as effective as it needs to be, especially if Penix is obviously the key, right? I mean, the left arm Michael Penix is going to win them and lose, and not necessarily lose them a game, but he's going to reside. I mean, that's how they beat Oregon with the touchdown to Roma Dunze. But there needs to be a little bit more of a balance, a little bit more of a sense of, hey, we can control a couple of these drives, because the past couple of games against Stanford and Arizona State, they've had 3 and outs where it's Penix is throwing on all 3 times and they maybe run it once or twice. And they actually, the most yards they get on those drives has been by the run game. So I think it's a little bit of offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb being a little stubborn and not going to the run as much, but then also they haven't been as good run blocking this season. I think that's just a fair assessment of the offensive line. It's gotten better, but it's nowhere near where it was last season and in previous seasons.
So talking about your front seven, last year we saw a lot of your edge rusher Braylon Trice actually just getting after quarterbacks, but he's just numbers wise. I haven't watched as much Husky football as I'd like, but his numbers are down. What do you attribute that to? And also, you guys seem like you're middle of the pack towards like 65, 70 range when it comes to rush defense, giving up 4.5 yards a carry the last 2 games. Going into this game, we have a really hot Marshawn Lloyd who's leading the country in yards per carry. What do you think your run defense, and also what's going on with your pass rush?
Yeah, so Braylon Trice, I mean, it's kind of the obvious target, where everyone knows how good he is. So he's been drawing a lot of double teams and even triple teams at times this season, with the tight end coming into chip at some point in the play. And teams are also realizing if you can get the ball out quickly in space, and again, I know it's somewhat of a cliche, but that's just been the way teams have attacked Washington's defense, right? The sense of if you get the ball out within the first 3 seconds, you're no longer able to have that pressure really matter. I mean, Bo Nix kind of showed that a number of times against Washington, where Braylon Trice beat Josh Connolly and it wasn't even close, but Bo already got rid of the ball at that point. So it negates any form of pressure that he's been able to have. He did have a sack against Stanford. So, and he had 16 total pressures. Again, pressures is kind of a loose stat. It's not really a great stat, but he's not necessarily been terrible. I think he just hasn't been effective because he's drawn a lot of double teams. The other part of that equation, to answer your second part of your question about the run defense, is Tulu Gasanoa didn't play against Stanford, and he's a very integral part of that run game because depending on how much stock you put into PFF and their grading system, Javon Parker, and I doubt anybody on the show will know his name, especially at this point in his career. He is the leading run defender for Washington, just from a grade perspective, about a 78, just under an 80%. The problem is UW really hasn't been able to stop the run against anyone. It goes back to last season. I think part of it, I don't know if it's a scheme problem or just a bodies problem, but Oregon State was able to run effectively with Damian Martinez. There's a number of teams that Bucky Irving, again, he runs over everybody, but Bucky Irving was just torments Washington. So I think if I'm USC, and even if you guys get a chance, go back and watch the UW Stanford game when Ashton Daniels ran in for his first rushing touchdown. There was 12 men on the field for Washington on defense and not a soul up the middle. So I know that was just I'm kind of cherry picking that play, but it's kind of been indicative of the problem where, UW might be good at times and they might be improving in other areas, but that run defense is one to where they've truly not been able to shut down teams that are talented at running the ball like USC is going to be.
In terms of the matchup between Washington's defense and USC's offense, I mean, obviously Caleb Williams is kind of like in his own category in terms of like a player that you don't want to see on the other side of the ball. who's a non-Caleb Williams USC player where there's a matchup or a plot point that you're particularly concerned about from a Washington perspective?
The second USC receiver, so whoever that, I mean, Dorian Singer isn't technically, hasn't been that guy in terms of a stat perspective this season, but whoever is not matched up against Jabbar Muhammad, because Jabbar Muhammad has been far and away Washington's best cornerback this season. The problem is that second position between Thaddeus Dixon and Elijah Jackson has kind of been, they've both been getting beaten at times, and they were the ones that allowed the touchdowns against Oregon. So everybody knows, okay, Jabbar Muhammad might take away a corner of the field, so he might take away USC's top receiver, but USC has a number of receivers that should be able to get open. And so I think Caleb, if he doesn't get pressured, he's going to be able to find those second and third options pretty quick. That is not covered by Jabbar Muhammad. And that's where USC can pick apart Washington's defense, unlike some other teams.
Oh, you're scaring me, because a couple of things you said. You said one team's get the ball out quick, and right away is one thing that this team has not done. And also, I'm just terrified of him lining up on the left side against the right side of our actually offense, because that will be a combination for trouble for USC. But speaking of offensive line, your offensive line, you guys this season have broken some new guys. How are they gelling together? And what do you think about your interior? Because I think if USC is going to be successful, and they have been with Bear Alexander, how well are your guards and your center bearing up to, like, got a guy like Bear Alexander?
Yeah, I was going to say that matchup, to partially answer the other question and to answer yours as well. That's the matchup that scares me, is Bear Alexander. Although he hasn't had a great season just in terms of what he should be, I think if you were to ask him an honest question, he would say, yeah, I haven't played up to my standard, but he is a guy that at any point, and this is kind of a perfect game in prime time for him to turn it on and have a big, potential multi-sack game, because Washington's center, redshirt freshman Parker Brailsford, has been fantastic this season. He has been honestly probably the offensive MVP if it's not a skill position player, right? Or not named Michael Penix even. You could honestly make that case, because as a redshirt freshman who has never started, he has played and carried himself and performed and also ran the offense like a third or fourth year lineman. Like, he has been just that effective. The problem has been the two guard spots. Nate Caleppo at left guard and Julius Buelo and Garrett Hatchett. There's a number of guys who've been kind of rotating at that right guard position. And for whatever reason, and the ironic part is they have kicked Parker Brailsford over to right guard at times to bring in a true freshman at center, Landon Hatchett, who you certainly can make the case has played better than his older brother Garrett at times when he's come in. But I think at the same point, if the answer to that question is you're now having a redshirt freshman and true freshman on your offensive line at some point, especially like a team like USC with Bear Alexander opposing you, that might make you pay. So Julius Buelo came back after missing a few games against Stanford, and he looked good, but he's more of a run blocker and hasn't been as good in the pass block. Nate Caleppo has been pretty better at pass blocking than run blocking. So it's a matter of just trying to find a balance, because they have two fantastic tackles, but the problem is they're just getting destroyed through the interior of the offensive line. And I think that's going to be probably what decides this game ultimately, whether it's USC running the ball or not. It's getting that pressure up the middle and just disrupting Washington. Because that to me, if Penix can't get in rhythm and USC can get a couple touchdowns on the board early, that kind of has a recipe for disaster for Washington.
That's what I'm hoping. I think that's the only way we're going to slow down this passing attacks, if we can just crush that pocket and make him fire away from a dirty pocket. So that's my hope.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing, is Washington has already faced Brandon Dorlus, who's another talented defensive lineman in the conference, and he had success, but not as much success. And I think the fact that this game is on the road in the Coliseum, USC, the defense, I'm sure all they've been hearing is, oh, this is the worst unit in the country, especially with the greatest offense, the greatest quarterback in college football. It's like, how are you guys letting us down, so to speak? This is their ultimate game to say, hey, against one of the best passing offenses, not named Caleb Williams in the country, we shut them down. And that has to start with Bear Alexander, and that has to start with some of those key players who not necessarily have played up to their potential. I think from an objective standpoint, I'm not saying he's terrible, but I'm just saying I think he certainly hasn't lived up to what he thought he could be or should be.
Now, Lars, what's the quarterback situation at Washington heading into next year? And while you think about the answer to that question, I bring that up just because, is there a sense that like this is a unique opportunity for Washington, or do the people around the program think Kalen DeBoer has basically a steamroller, like it's going to be Chris Peterson only better, and like Washington is set to be dominant, or is this a unique opportunity? Because as we know, DeBoer and Penix were together at Indiana, they reunited, they have a unique chemistry that might not have existed if Washington had to go to a quarterback who was already within the program or had to go elsewhere in the transfer portal. DeBoer and Penix is a unique marriage. Is there a sense that like this is a unique season and opportunity, or is Washington set to be dominant at the 10, 11 win program for the long term? What's the calculus there? And again, what's Washington's quarterback situation beyond 2023?
So the short answer is yes to both, right? Because I think, to your point, this is a very unique situation. I mean, first of all, just talking about the story that Michael Penix has had. 3 injuries, 4 seasons at Indiana, all end with an injury of some sort, especially 2 knee injuries and a quarterback. That's like something you don't come back from. You might be a quarterback coach and you might, stay in the business and stay in that, but you'll never play, right? And especially never having a thought of playing in the NFL. But in the times that he did play at Indiana, he showed potential. And I think DeBoer and with offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, as I mentioned, that has been like the perfect triangle. Right. So it's like not often do you have that perfect triangle. I mean, Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams are kind of like this. There's the fact that there's that third triangle because Grubb wasn't with him at Indiana. So I think that was the one time where it's like, but the ironic part about that is when Grubb was still at Fresno State and DeBoer was at Indiana, they were still texting each other and saying, and again, a lot of coaches do this, but like, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this play? What do you think of that play? And just kind of just trading notes. And so I think you're absolutely right. It's an absolutely unique situation. They will, regardless of, to now answer the back half of this question, no matter how the offense looks next season, whether it's Austin Mack, who's a true freshman that enrolled early. The fact that he just turned, I believe, 16 or 17 when he got on campus after he got on campus in June. So I'm not necessarily sure you want to go down that road, but Jake Browning proved that also could work out as well under Chris Peterson. But I don't necessarily think like that would be like a best case scenario in 25, right? Where Austin's got, maybe gets to play next year, but he's not expected to be the starter and things like that. You do have Dylan Morris, who's a junior this season. Because of COVID, he'll have 1 extra season to come back next year. And this is where the answer is going to be, the offense will never look like this. It might look similar, right? But I think there's going to be a lot of changes from this offense with Penix to next season with whoever, whether it's Dylan Morris, Austin Mack, Will Haskell from a San Diego State who transferred in, who's ineligible this season, or a 4th quarterback, right? They could always go to the portal and get a quarterback as well. And that remains to be seen whether they'll do that or not. My bet would be Austin Mack, just because he has such a high upside. He's 6'5", 6'6", perfect. I mean, reminds me of, I told Ryan Grubb this when I talked to him in February after he signed. And I said he looks like Andrew Luck, like is that? But he's not as big as Andrew Luck. But I think he kind of that dynamic style that maybe Lamar Jackson were, but a better passer. The problem is when he played this spring, he was a true freshman who literally was just holding on to the ball or fall camp, just holding on to the ball, taking sacks all the time, which I guess isn't necessarily the worst thing, but also you need to show a lot more improvement. So I'll be curious to see how he looks in the spring. So I would have more of a convincing answer after I see him in the spring. But to answer your question overall, it's not going to look like this. I think this is very unique. This is very, they have multiple running backs coming back next season that I think they might be more of a run offense with maybe a quarterback who can sling it. But if Dylan Morris is the guy, he can execute the offense. He's fine. He's serviceable, but he's not at Penix's level. And so I think that remains to be seen how the quarterbacking will look. But I think certainly it'll be effective. It just might not be the exact same.
Lars, I'm going to play off of Matt's question to a certain extent, because here we've got a program that's a top 15 program in the country, something in that range. Chris Peterson did a remarkable job. Anyone who knows college football knows that he was one of the very best. And then there was the Jimmy Lake debacle. And as soon as Kalen DeBoer came on board, that wasn't necessarily an obvious choice in regards to career progression and career accomplishments, because we're looking at a head coach who was only in place at Fresno State for one full season, had never coached a Power 5 school, was considered an up-and-coming coach and an offensive mind in the game, but again, unproven really as a head coach. He gets this job and it's just taken off. Do you consider this to have just been a good spot for Kalen DeBoer to have arrived in, or what makes him as good as he appears to be?
Well, I think, and I know this is going to sound cliche or whatever, or not cliche, but kind of like, oh, where you cover him every day. But he really is like one of the more genuine persons. And to your point, Chris Peterson, I covered his time at Washington as well. But DeBoer is even different than Peterson from he's almost like a dad. He's just a casual dad you could run into at the softball field on Sunday, and you wouldn't know that he also is a college football head coach and one of the best in the country with his 19-2 record. But he's just been that kind of guy, and I think the players responded to that, because after Jimmy Lake, who that could not have been a worse 24 months to 18 month span. I mean, between hiring John Donovan, who, maybe he'll replace Brian Ferentz at Iowa, but aside from that, like no other team in the country is going to be going to want to hire him, especially after what he did at Washington, just because, I mean, yes, Dylan Morris isn't great in terms of, he's not Michael Penix, but he is not as bad as that offense showed that year. And I think Jimmy Lake lost the team at, I want to say, by the end of September, early October, even before the punch on the sideline and the fallout that ensued from that. But I think when DeBoer came in, he took the perfect approach, the one that Peterson didn't take. It's a player-run program. That is a loaded roster. To answer part of your question as well, this same roster plus Michael Penix and sprinkle in a few others went 4-8 2 years ago. Roma Dunze was a part of that team. Jalen McMillan was a part of that team. Jalen Polk was a part of that team. Giles Jackson, I believe, was a part of that team as well. And so it's crazy to think that one quarterback and one head coach can change that. But when you bring in the kind of caliber person that Caleb is, and I mean, so a little bit of backstory to answer your question. I asked Lincoln Riley about DeBoer at Media Day back in July, and he kind of had the same reaction where it's like, yeah, once you get to know him, he's just such a great guy, and he's just such a fun person to be around, fun guy to talk to, just, a basic dad who just also happens to be a really genius offensive mind. And I think that's kind of what Washington was clamoring for, right? You needed, especially after Jimmy Lake, a defensive-minded head coach who neglected the offense, hired the worst candidate you could possibly hire because a lot of guys told him no, that he had lost that program. He was done, but the players are great. The players are talented, and with the right coaching and the right people around him, you can hit a home run here, and he's done just that. I think, and also, let's be fair, a lot of breaks have also gone his way, on the field. Like the kick goes wide right. If it goes 2 feet to the left, we're having a different discussion. If Taj Davis doesn't catch the ball last year, there's so many things that have just fallen into place, and it's almost like it couldn't happen to a better person. Right. That cliche, right? It's almost like a movie, right? It's like in a few years from now, somebody will get really excited. They want to make some cheesy, college football movie about a dad and who has a daughter who's going to play softball at his university that he works at. So I think it's been just a perfect alignment. I don't even think Kalen could have told you this was going to happen 3 years ago. Because he also wasn't their first choice either, which is mind blowing looking back on it.
Well, I don't know how deep USC's defensive coordinator search should go, but you just brought Jimmy Lake, and I guess I have to throw it out to you. So Jen Cohen said the new AD here at USC. When Jimmy Lake left, obviously his dismissal, is there any world where he could even be a candidate at USC as defensive coordinator? Because as defensive coordinator, I mean, by the way you're talking about him as a head coach, it's just like the inverse of what everyone's saying about Lincoln Riley right now, about hiring a guy on the other side of the ball, etc. That everyone said don't hire him. But as far as defensive coordinator is concerned, is there anything that would preclude him from becoming a DC here at USC?
I don't believe so at this point. I mean, I believe his contract would have run out, and certainly by the end of the season. I could be wrong on that, but I think there was no way he was signed through 2023. I mean, he might have had a clause actually, Jen Cohen put a clause in his contract where if she left before, and he was still the head coach, he automatically got a 5-year extension. So like she was perfectly protected in every way, shape, or form. So it was, and I'll have to go back on Twitter and find it just to bring it up on Saturday, because it was truly one of those, like, people were like, no, you're making this up. I'm like, here's the contract with the UW seal and everything. And this is actually legitimate. And, but to answer your question, I do think Jimmy Lake would be, I just don't know necessarily, especially with the way things went at Washington. And then the way in which nobody hired him for 2 years after he left. Now I understand maybe not as a coach, but nobody brought him in as an analyst. Nick Saban didn't bring him into his rehab program. You know, the coaching rehab program, I should say, just to be clear. You know, nobody wanted to touch him. And finally he lands with Sean McVay as an assistant head coach. No position title. So this is basically like, okay, Jimmy wants to get back to the NFL. I'm not necessarily sure he wants to come back or should come back to college, maybe for a while, just because of the way he handled that whole situation. I mean, he went from being, to your point, probably one of, if not the best defensive backs coach in college football and a rising defensive coordinator to somebody nobody wanted to touch in 2 years.
That's what I'm thinking. There must be something that happened around that's probably not out there that Jen Cohen would be fully knee deep in. So that's why I was curious if you had heard anything or knew anything about that.
Yeah, I guess that would be my way of answering that question without it, directly citing the examples. But there were multiple instances where I think Jen would know, Jimmy, I'm glad he's on his feet. Like they're not going to drag him, right? They're not, smearing his name or anything like that. But it's like, yeah, like if you don't have to, don't.
Lars, we approach this matchup. We see the betting line there, Washington -3. We rarely see an over-under at 75.5, so we're expecting fireworks. It's at the Coliseum, which shows that Vegas believes that Washington's a slightly better football team, of course, being a road favorite. Is the thought from you going into this game that, okay, this USC poses a serious threat, and I'm just looking for a win in any way possible? Or there seems to be a feel around each team right now that seems to be coming from completely opposite ends of the spectrum, where despite Washington not playing its best football for the past few weeks, seems to be riding this season of momentum and just building its case to be one of the best teams in college football. And USC seems to be, despite a record that's still respectable at 6-2, seems to be kind of teetering on the brink of disaster. And I say that in a not in an alarming way, but where, some of these games could have gone the other way. This could be let's say a 4-4 football team. So how do you view this matchup in terms of USC being a true threat to pull off what would be a nominal upset?
Yeah, I mean, this is coming for full transparency. Coming into the season, I thought Washington would have one loss this season, and USC was the loss. So now that the reasons have kind of changed for that. Now, I think the reason why Washington is favored only slightly, especially as a road favorite, their defense is slightly better than USC's, but USC's offense isn't far and above better than Washington. And obviously Washington arguably has the better offense coming into the game, depending on how you view offense. I mean, I think USC has the more dynamic quarterback. Washington has the better quarterback, but not at the moment. But at the drop of a dime, Penix has shown that he can turn it on when he needs to. The thing is, this is a game almost, again, the way it was setting up against Oregon, where, okay, we know these offenses are going to score points, right? We know they're probably going to get both over 30. Who's going to play defense? And at what point in the game are you going to play that defense? Is it going to be only on the final drive? Is it going to, because, I mean, USC came back against California, which, tip of the hat to that. I was low-key pulling for that just because I wanted this matchup to matter a little bit more, so it could be a top 25 matchup. And I think Washington, it just feels like they have a loss right. He's trying to be objective, right? It feels like at some point this team has got to lose to somebody before going to a Pac-12 championship. This would be the perfect loss for that, right? You're on the road. Maybe you lose a close one. Caleb Williams has a late drive and the defense just can't hold at the end, right? That's the way that Washington would lose this game. And I think USC would take that, right? Because then, hey, we beat Washington, the top 5 team in the country, you know, especially going to the Big Ten, kind of planting that flag as well. But also it doesn't preclude Washington from still reaching the goals they want to achieve, because I believe they could, especially winning the Pac-12 championship with a 1 loss to USC, could still get in the college football playoff. So that path is still there. It's just a matter of don't lose that second game like they did last season, because that's where everything fell apart. So USC could be that, and certainly could be that game. I mean, the talent is there. It's a matter of can the coaching match, and I think that's where the coaching. If I'm taking coaching right now, it's Washington. No disrespect to Lincoln Riley, but it's Washington on both sides of the ball, especially on defense, though.
But you told us how USC can attack defensively if they're going to be successful against Washington. If you were on the offense, you were calling. What are you attacking on defense? What would you say is your weakness on defense that they should be attacking in order to be successful in this game?
Well, partially, I want to say run the ball until Washington proves that you can. And then, but the problem is because similar to Washington, you have one of the best let's be real, the best quarterback in college football, just from a dynamic perspective. And that's the one thing Washington hasn't done well is defend running quarterbacks. So I think if Caleb is able to even just get out of the pocket, if Lincoln does design rollouts and things like that, whether it's getting the ball out quickly or just letting Caleb run, I think extending the defense is kind of how you can break Washington's defense, because Braylon Trice is going to bring pressure, run away from, design the run away from that, scheme away from just to test the other side of the line. Not that Zion Tupuola-Tui isn't capable, but I think, that would be the first start. And then the second start is just let Caleb be Caleb, just let the game almost come to Caleb, right? Because I think if they're able to control Washington's offense for the first couple of drives, and Caleb is able to get, 10 or 14 points on the board, then his confidence is back. Then it almost becomes a snowball effect for USC. But that starts with letting Caleb prove how much of an elite athlete he is with a mixture of running and passing. Because I think if you're just trying to pass against Washington, maybe the secondary shows up. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, Washington's going to be questionably without Cameron Fabiculano or Asa Turner, who both missed against Stanford. So if you're looking at a third string secondary there, or at least at safety, there's plenty of ways in which Washington's defense is susceptible. Their strength is the front seven, as you mentioned, the linebacker Edefuano Luficio, Afonso Tuputala, and then Braylon Trice in the front four, as we talked about. But that secondary has been one where they've been able to make the play when it matters. But I think against the caliber of team with USC, Zach, I don't know if Zachariah Branch will be able to play, but if he is, there's so many weapons that USC has that maybe even haven't shown up this season, that this is kind of that ripe game to where, hey, this is an offensive showcase. Which of course is the cliche of, now we're going to see a 23-27 game somehow. Like, but I don't envision any world in which that's the case. I've tried. I've tried. There's just no way.
The way you just described that is against Utah and against Cal early in the game when USC was moving the ball. That's exactly what they're doing. Getting the ball out on schedule, Caleb running and running the ball. And yeah, I'm hoping they listen to your advice, because I think that is going to be the way to go.
Yeah, and I think the thing about Washington is not to cut you guys off, but just to add on to that, I think it's a matter of, it's not that they're not capable, but that the offenses are just so good in this conference that the offensive talent outweighs the defensive talent, no matter what matchup you're looking at, no matter what team you're looking at. That's just kind of been my opinion, my surmise of the season so far.
Tim, Matt, anything else?
No, that was amazing. Thank you, Lars. That was awesome.
Absolutely, it
Great
was.
stuff, Lars. Thank you.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you guys. Thank you,
Lars. We want to make sure everybody can find your work. We see that you're a co-host on the Locked On Huskies podcast, and also UW Fan Nation. So, what do you guys have available for everyone this week?
Yeah, so Roman Tomashoff and I co-host the Locked On Huskies podcast. we put those out Monday through Friday. I believe we had our injury recap and kind of our Monday morning press conference recap that comes out that'll come out on Tuesday morning. And then on Inside the Huskies, actually, I also cover basketball as well. So we'll have a mixture of basketball stories. Kentucky West, Severe Wheeler and Keon Brooks Jr. are now back together at Washington after separating for a year. They played together at Kentucky. Washington might actually have a basketball program. So you can check out all of our work at Inside the Huskies, si.com/college/Washington. Honestly, I think at times I've been able to work where just si.com/Washington and somehow it shows up. But if you want to add that extra one, si.com/college/Washington is a way to check out all of our written work.
Very cool. Well, Lars, we appreciate you stopping by. That was great stuff, and enjoy the game this weekend.
Thank you, guys. You as well.
All right. Good to hear from Lars. Appreciate him stopping by. We need to get to some super chats, I believe.
Yeah. So first up, we have Adrian.
Adrian, if Alex Grinch was this bad in Oklahoma and Riley did not fire him, what makes us believe he will now? Also, any defensive coordinators you guys think would be a good fit at USC?
I think that, in terms of defensive core, there are two interesting thought processes to consider. One is you want a guy with Big Ten experience and Big Ten knowledge. The other thought process is Lincoln Riley needs to get a guy from the Big 12 who went up against him and who could not only be tactically astute in general, but who could help to self-scout Lincoln Riley's offense and be a voice that says, "Hey, Lincoln, don't do this because this is how I defended you at Oklahoma. Do this other thing that coaches aren't expecting." I think those are two interesting branches to consider. So Lincoln Riley could go consider the John Heacock of Iowa State. Like, that was a defensive coordinator in the Big 12 who frustrated Riley sometimes. You could also look at Kansas State under Kleeman. Joe Klanderman is the defensive coordinator there. Kansas State gave Oklahoma some problems. So I'm of the school that getting a guy with Big Ten working knowledge, Big Ten experience, because those are the teams you're going to go against. So Jim Leonard won, Tom Allen, especially if he gets fired by Indiana. But even if he doesn't, entice him. USC should be making an offer to Tom Allen saying, "Hey, leave the misery of finishing in the bottom tier of the Big Ten. Come with us." Leonard won, Allen too, but there is something to be said for bringing in a Big 12 defensive coordinator who could self-scout for Lincoln Riley with USC. Those are the two interesting, larger strands of thought that I have about the defensive coordinator position.
And you even stayed away from Jim Leonard there. I saw that. I saw how he fits your first category. But what about a guy like Gary Patterson? What have you thought about him?
Well, he would fit that Big 12.
The second category.
He would be under that Big 12 umbrella because he definitely locked horns with Riley and would be able to not only be good on his own as a defensive mind, but he could also tell Lincoln, "Hey, in terms of how people are going to try to attack your offense in the Big Ten, here's the variation you can use." So that would be a lot of wisdom in the room.
And then we got a second one from Adam. And
Adam,
guys,
thank you so much for the super chat. Guys, we should be happy about joining the Big Ten. They are filled with Midwestern farm boys who are slow and simple on offense, except for Ohio State. Adam, okay, I'm not going to go off on this, but go right ahead. Well, I've been talking for the last 12 or 13 hours, so I don't know that I have much left in me, or otherwise I would tear this comment to shreds. But go ahead, Matt.
Well, on offense, he's got a pretty good point. Yeah, the offense is in the Big Ten outside of Penn State and Ohio State and Michigan.
Way overgeneralized, but yeah, there's a point in there. Sure.
I think the thing about the Big Ten, I think what this season has magnified is USC has to crush it on the offensive line in the portal. And this year's portal pieces on the offensive line just did not make the grade. Pregnon, Tarquin, Kingston, just they were not home runs. Bobby Haskins from Virginia last year, that was a home run. He was excellent. You know, when we had a thin line, he really stepped up. Like that was a portal acquisition where the coaching staff really nailed it. This year's acquisitions, not so much. And USC has to have a top class line, such as what we saw in 2022 with Voorhees and Nealon and Dedich and Haskins all in the mix. If you have a so-so offensive line, or at least an inconsistent offensive line, such as what we have this year, you know, then the Big Ten is going to give USC problems. But if USC gets the offensive line right, more than any other position group, other than, of course, quarterback, any non-quarterback position group, if USC gets its offensive line right and can have everyone in place, you have studs at every position, or at least 4 of the 5 positions, USC will be in place to do very, very well in the Big Ten, because you neutralize the physicality of the defensive lines and the linebackers that USC is going to see. And that's where those Big Ten offenses, they're not going to be able to exploit USC's defense to the extent that what we're seeing in the Pac-12. So if USC could just get the offensive line right, the program would be in very good shape. But what we've seen from this offensive line, what we've seen from Josh Henson, and we have to say what we've seen from strength coach Bennie Wiley, that's why I'm so insistent in banging the drum for him to be fired. USC is a soft team, and if you have a soft team, that goes to the strength coach. Like you know, Grinch or any defensive coordinator, that's about tactics, that's about scheme, technique. But you know, if you're a soft team, strength coach, that's what it's all about. And there are guys who do it really well at a much higher level. And going into the Big Ten, you just can't wing it. You just can't settle for average. Bennie Wiley is average, or at least right up to this point, he has not proven to be above average. It's not translating into toughness. So really, for Adam and anyone else talking about the Big Ten, get the strength coach right, get the offensive line right, and then you could really have something.
So I think we're going to need to go into the portal to get a tackle. Just a big name, and we can. There has to be someone out there that wants to be the corner piece. Because here's what I am going to tell you, Matt. We don't need to go to the portal for all this stuff. I am sold on, and this offensive line group they brought in is not soft. They're nasty. These guys are big, strong, nasty. If you watch their film, Paige, Talalele, Manuelos, Noah, Raymond, these guys are all legit. They're waiting. They're not stepping in as true freshmen, but they'll all be redshirt freshmen next year. And I'm telling you, if half those guys pan out, I'm not sold on the fact that Mason Murphy's gonna make that leap and become that guy at tackle. I don't see it happening. But then also that's why you're gonna go to the portal for and then also Tarquin, just for whatever reason, hasn't been able to put it together. So they're gonna need a big time left tackle. But also USC this year has the #1 interior offensive lineman in the country in Jason Zandamela, number 41 overall, #1 interior offensive lineman. Is coming in from Florida. That guy is also just a nasty, mean, strong interior lineman, already built, over 300 pounds, ready to go. I don't know if he'll start as a freshman, but he won't be too far behind that group. I think they're building this line. I think it's the one thing everyone forgot about is that line we had last year absolutely made us much better than we were. Losing 2 All-American offensive linemen clearly shows up this year. There's a gap, and it just for whatever reason it happened. But we're going to have big dudes, strong dudes, maulers that are Big Ten ready. So I'm that part I'm not worried about. You are starting to begin to worry me a little bit about Wiley, because I was watching that game against Cal. And guys are getting bull rushed and shoved back 3-4 yards on our offensive line. I was just shaking my head. So that you may begrudgingly, because when I say you're right, then I gotta say the Oklahoma fans are right. And I don't like doing that, Matt. I don't make me do that.
I don't like it either,
but I'll tell you what, they are bigger, but they're getting had. There's a difference. There's being big and there's being strong. They're not the same thing. And then I watched some guys get handled on the offensive line on Saturday. I was literally watching for it. I was just watching the line almost the whole game. And it was pretty bad at the moments on bull rushes, just getting shoved right back.
Just want to say one thing very quickly. Young Tiny, whose opinion I respect, were a lot of people saying in the offseason that the USC players looked bigger, thicker? Yes. I wasn't like joining the Bennie Wiley praise chorus. Like I was in wait and see mode with Bennie Wiley. I mean, we didn't talk a lot about Bennie Wiley in the summer here at the Voice of College Football, but like I was not like part of his fan club. And I was certainly like, if I was in a mode of like, we need to really see it from Alex Grinch, I felt we also really needed to see it to get proof of evolution from Bennie Wiley as well. So Young Tiny, everyone was saying Bennie Wiley was the truth. Well, I wasn't. Like I was still in wait and see mode. Just
I will say it takes a little bit longer than a season and a half to turn around a culture, because you have what was there and the team coming in, and there has been a lot of roster turnover, etc. Riley talked about a winning culture. The teams we want to compete against, the teams that our fans are putting us up against, these are programs that have been rolling for a while. Who's the upstart? Maybe a Florida State, really? But other than that, the teams we're talking about that we're USC, we should be this. We've been down for a while, guys, and we don't have. Where are you going to see it? On the lines. And as far as the strength, I will tell you, I wasn't shouting. All I said is that these guys are bigger. And Matt, there was no doubt about it. We were hearing that Bennie Wiley is going to shrink our guys. And all my comments were, well, you know what? We're looking at them. We're seeing the numbers. These guys are markedly bigger than they were last year. And like I said, though, bigger doesn't always mean stronger. So that might be the issue.
Those are different things. Absolutely.
And then Adam
actually reminds me of a podcast that one of my guests sent me a few weeks ago. We had a guy on the Miami show, the strength and conditioning training within the football ranks and how it's tailored to each position and some of the metrics that they come with to measure explosion, and talking specifically about offensive linemen, that these offensive linemen sometimes that you see that are squatting and benching 650 pounds, that's negligible. There was a study done about offensive linemen in particular and how effective they would be in the NFL, or how NFL ready they would be. And there's like a strength threshold that once it hits a certain ability and range of squatting and benching, that it's negligible, and basically you're killing their explosion at that point. Anyway, just as a side note. And, I'm sorry, what's that, Tim?
No, go ahead. Do you want to hit this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just make one other side note without any context to the previous comment. I do know that USC is going to be facing per team more NFL players than they are in the Pac-12 once they go to the Big Ten. Adam, guys, let me ask you this. What specifically is so bad about Alex Grinch that you think, as a new defensive coordinator, will cure? Isn't the problem that the players don't execute and tackle and lack the talent?
Well, so I don't think they lack the talent. Okay, so at some positions, we're probably not where we need to be talent-wise, but there aren't many. And I will tell you this, Adam, the guys we have on defense, for the most part so far this season, maybe not going forward for the last 3 games, right? But the guys we're seeing on offense, the dudes we have on defense are on par talent-wise, really, with everyone we've seen so far this year. Roughly, right? Line and skill position, roughly. That's one thing. At some point, Adam, I think it has to be whatever. It may be a great scheme, but this is college. You have limited time to practice, et cetera, et cetera. At some point, you got to say it's not working. And so you could have the greatest scheme in the world. You got the greatest players in the world. But if these players can't do the scheme that you want them to do, if they're not getting these run fits after, what do we have now? 13 to over 20 games that we played, and they still don't have these run fits down. You have, granted, it was a true freshman at linebacker, but at some point you have to say it's not working. And I think that's where I'm coming from. I don't know. I'm not at practice. I don't know exactly where it's breaking down. I don't know whose assignments these are, whose gap this is, whatever. But I do know that game after game, they're letting teams that are not nearly as talented as them as they are on defense. We're letting offenses. That Utah offense is bad, and we made them look good. That's why I say we need to move, and that's why I think it's the coordinator.
And Adam, you've said, and narrowly in a vacuum, I agree with you. Just firing the defensive coordinator is not itself a whole solution. It's only a tiny part. It's only the beginning of something. That you also have to fire Bennie Wiley as strength coach. Like, you can't just fire Grinch. You need to also fire Wiley. But also, you need a good replacement. Let's remember who preceded Alex Grinch as a USC defensive coordinator. Todd Orlando. And who came before Todd Orlando? Clancy Pendergast. Those were also disastrous defensive coordinators. So Adam, like, you need a good coordinator. But if we just postulate, Adam, just for the sake of a hypothetical, if USC and Lincoln Riley are able to land Jim Leonhard, I'm not predicting they will. In fact, I'd say it's probably not likely. He probably wants to be a head coach. That's the industry scuttlebutt, that Jim Leonhard wants his next big job to be a head coaching job. So he's probably not going to say yes. But if we lived in a world where Jim Leonhard is USC's defensive coordinator in 2024, this program is going to rock and roll because Jim Leonhard is an elite defensive coordinator. So it's not just replacing Grinch. Like, if you replaced Grinch with Clancy Pendergast or Todd Orlando, it wouldn't be any better. But if you put in Jim Leonhard, or if you put in Tom Allen, or if you put in Gary Patterson, like, you are getting a massive upgrade. You're getting an elite defensive mind if you have any of those three guys. So this presumes that you're going to get a significant upgrade. But if you just focus on fire Grinch and that's it, no. But you have to replace him with somebody really good, and you have to get the strength coach who can also get those guys to be real dudes on the defensive side of the ball.
And we don't need an elite defense, guys. That's what I'm trying to freaking tell you.
Why not?
We just need.
Why not?
Okay, no, yes. Okay, no, but listen, hold on, Matt. I get you. Obviously, that's just cream on. That's the cream on top. I'm saying a top 15, top 25, and we're going to be lights out. Top 30, and we're going to be in the playoffs. We're going to be able to compete with almost anyone in the Big Ten, I think. I truly do believe this. If we had a top 30 defense with our offense, we will be in every game. Michigan included, Ohio State included, Penn State included, a revamped Wisconsin included. Whatever we have to go up against in the Big Ten, people keep forgetting. People are like just all of a sudden forgetting that Lincoln Riley, what he does on offense. You guys stop, okay? Just stop the crazy ideas. I know we're flooded by Oklahoma bullshit every day in our chat, but realize that Lincoln Riley is not some fraud, some scam artist. He is one of the elite offensive minds in football. And if we land the names that we just talked about and a half dozen others that could fill in and do we're almost winning games with we'll say it right now. Last year, guess who our defensive coordinator was? And we were a game away. We were Achilles heel away from making the playoffs with Grinch as our defensive coordinator. So everybody pump the brakes, relax, and realize that whoever they hire that has a competent scheme that our guys can run is going to be enough for us to do solid work in the Big Ten.
All right. I believe we have one more. No?
No, but Eddie, I just say this one.
Okay.
Eddie, Pete did it in two. Stop. Why do all people think that every roster that you inherit is the same? Should I start going down the list? You guys heard of Troy Polamalu? I mean, I'm not going to do it. Do you know the players that Pete had? Carson Palmer, you ever heard of that guy? It's not like he walked into the situation and the cupboard was bare. Hackett couldn't coach, but USC back then was just recruiting itself. It really was. And our offensive line, that offensive line that they had there was insane. So please don't make these comments anymore. You can't compare what Hackett had. What Pete Carroll had. You can't compare what Helton walked into to what the train wreck really after Helton. Come on, you guys. We lived through Helton, and you guys think that flip a switch and all of a sudden we're going to be up there with Ohio State and Michigan and Georgia. It doesn't work that way, guys. Process, please.
Absolutely. I can't argue with that. Certainly. Join Matt each and every day throughout the week. Get yourself ready for the big game against Washington on Trojans Wire with Matt. Tim, when is the next show we've got going?
Matt, I'm behind the scenes. I don't know if you got email. I'm terrible with email. I am so bad with email, almost as bad as I am with. Anyway, I think Matt, we're doing 4 o'clock if you can. I'm going to the UCLA USC women's soccer match, so at Westwood. So I can't do it at 5 or 6 like we know, but 4 o'clock I could do it and then cruise up the 405 freeway, make that game.
Sure.
So okay, there you got
on Friday,
4 o'clock call-in show. Preview. There's a bunch we didn't have time to cover. Lars did such a great job, man. You guys, good job getting Lars. That was awesome. But there's a lot to talk about, Marshawn Lloyd, etc., and a lot on recruiting I wanted to get into. We had that time to get into. So call in, you guys. It's a call-in show. It's the only one I know of. It's a basically viewer-driven call-in show where you guys let us know what you want to talk about. You guys ask us the questions. You guys are the show. We're here to talk. So that'll be Friday at 4 p.m., 7 p.m. Eastern.
USC fans, I know that you're not going to be too enthralled with the college football playoff reveal, the rankings reveal on Tuesday night, but just in case, we will watch it together over on the main channel. Then I will take your calls after the rankings are revealed. So we've got our college football playoff rankings reveal watch party and call-in show on the main channel Tuesday night, 7 Eastern and 4 Pacific.
And
all right, everyone, appreciate you.
Where Washington fits into that picture becomes a plot point for the USC game. So that's a reason to watch Mark's college football playoff ranking show here at the Voice of College Football.
It's going to be a great discussion. And I think we're going to be doing the telephone calls, right, Mark? So those guys, let's light it up. Come on in. It'll be fun.
And just for everyone, if we lose to Washington, we become a basketball school for the next several months.
And quite a good basketball, I tell you. This is going to be a great season.
Okay, don't say that too loud on my college football channel here, Matt.
Well, but it brings up the point for everyone here watching on Monday night that I will be covering USC's season opening basketball game, a big game against Kansas State next Monday night. So we're going to be having a different kind of lineup here at the Voice of College Football.
Trojan Conquest Live, everyone. We'll see you back here next Monday at 8 Pacific.